Welcome to Sharpe Insights, Conversations with Your Plan Giving Experts, a podcast for development professionals. Whether you're new to the field or looking to enhance your existing program, we will provide practical tips, expert advice, and real-world stories to deepen your understanding of plan giving. If you're committed to securing long-term support for your nonprofit, you've come to the right place.
Making a list and checking it twice as we make plans for the most fruitful months of the fundraising year. With fall just around the corner, what needs to be done now to prepare for the year-end giving season? What is the potential impact of Giving Tuesday, and why is it important? With an uncertain economy and new tax laws, how do we effectively communicate with planned and major giving donors during this time? Today we'll explore why year-end is a prime time to talk about not only current but legacy gifts and how to maximize donor engagement and long-term support. I'm joined today by Sharpe Group Senior Consultants Kristin Croone and Julie Schuldner. Julie and Kristin, thanks so much for being here and for your willingness to share your expertise with us.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Grant. Thanks, Grant. I'm at the same time excited now about the holidays and also stressing because I haven't started my shopping yet.
Same. I'll start around December 20th, probably.
Uh-oh. Glad you're not buying for me.
That's right. But you never know. You might get something. Let's start at the top here. And I'll just open this to both of you, but overall, why is year-end such a critical time for nonprofit fundraising?
Well, I'll start with that, Grant. Historically, and as we've seen since our modern tax code has been in place since the early 1900s, if a donor is looking for an income tax deduction due to a charitable gift, it must be done before December 31st. So that timing creates some urgency for donors. Generally, a donor will review their tax return for the year 2025 and determine whether or if they would benefit from a charitable gift. And so they would need to make that before the 31st. Also, in addition to reviewing the taxes, year-end is often a time when people review their portfolios, check their performance, and they may identify some highly appreciated securities or something of that nature that would be an excellent gift.
In addition, Kristin, to the tax planning and a review of your assets, I think it's traditional behavior, right? People are used to giving. It's the season of giving. And so as part of that tradition of giving to others, you give to your charitable causes as well. And so based on that behavior, it's a great time to ask for those year-end gifts. So it's really the emotional appeal of encouraging that generosity.
Thanks for that context. I'm curious, I always hear the term Giving Tuesday. Can you tell us what Giving Tuesday is and how nonprofits should integrate Giving Tuesday into their messaging at year end?
Sure. Giving Tuesday is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. This is sort of a recognition of, as Julie said, the cultural charitable aspect of the last quarter of the year. It was started in around 2012, I believe. And it's a great way to kick off your year-end messaging. It can be a launch pad for your entire year-end campaign. You don't want it to be a standalone event. It's not just Giving Tuesday and then Wednesday's a new day. And it's really a great way for philanthropy in general to rise to the public consciousness. So you're sort of benefiting from the collaborative campaigns of all of your nonprofit cohorts.
Giving Tuesday, it's like Kristin said, it hasn't been around too long, but it follows the theme of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and it is a great kickoff for the charitable season. The clients that I have seen that have had the most success are those that start marketing Giving Tuesday prior to the date. So again, it's not a standalone, but really you need to plan and execute a multi-channel campaign, which gets people excited for Giving Tuesday and then continues that excitement throughout the season. So encouraging matching gifts, peer-to-peer fundraising, definitely share impact stories. You really need a theme or a goal to find your greatest success through Giving Tuesday as the start.
Okay, thanks for that. So the holidays are really busy times for people, especially those of us who procrastinate our Christmas shopping until the very end. And I don't think I'm alone in that. There's also a lot of marketing coming at people around this time. You mentioned Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and there's Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, and people are doing a lot of planning and frankly just dividing their attention between all of these different things. What are the best ways to communicate effectively with donors during this time to draw their attention to your organization?
Grant, you raise a good point. There can be a lot of noise at year end, and you definitely want to stand out and be heard through that noise. Julie mentioned a multi-channel plan, multi-touch campaign. The statistics show that most organizations will send between 6 to 8 communications between Thanksgiving and the end of the year, and then the frequency sort of amps up towards the end of the year. But be sure you're doing this in multiple different ways. I talk about print and email, but what really is most effective is some peer-to-peer fundraising. Engage your board members, engage your volunteers, have them reach out to their networks. It's a perfect opportunity. Year-end creates an opportunity to talk about giving without being uncomfortable or seeming unusual. And also, maybe if you can get a donor to match year-end gifts, some sort of urgency or doubling your impact can just add to the motivation for year-end giving.
I always like to point out when we're talking about these multi-channel strategies, the fact that you have to do what works for you as an organization. And so some of our listeners represent smaller organizations, maybe a one-person development shop, whereas others have much larger staffs, people divided between annual giving, major gifts, planned giving. And so you're looking at a lot more capacity for executing these strategies. So you really have to do what's right for you and not get overwhelmed by all of these different opportunities: email, direct mail, social media, phone calls. Think about your database, how you can segment them, and what's the greatest form of outreach for that particular audience. And like Kristin said, get your board involved. It's a great way, especially during the holiday season, to really have that mission moment with your board. Get them to make phone calls and thank donors for giving these special gifts during the holiday season.
So we're speaking pretty broadly about these strategies, and there obviously isn't really a one-size-fits-all strategy for all organizations. I was wondering if either of you could share some specific examples of successful strategies that maximized year-end giving for any of your clients.
Qualified charitable distributions, or QCDs as they're referred to, have increasingly become a popular year-end gift, and they're relatively new. And so it's taken organizations a while to figure out exactly how to execute the marketing for that and also the receipt of those gifts. What we've learned is that the qualified charitable distributions cannot be treated the same as a stock transfer. These transactions take time, a lot of time. And so at the beginning, when QCDs were first available, many organizations marketed them as a true year-end possibility. What we're seeing, though, is that you really do need to market these and get to work on these sorts of transactions in September and October in order to ensure that those transactions are complete at year-end. So I guess this points to the element of timing and understanding the mechanisms that you're discussing and how they relate to the deadline of December 31st.
That's a great point. And I will just add that clients that have seen the most success are those that don't treat this end of year gift as a one-off. So it's not the only time that they're communicating with their donors. They have multiple touch points throughout the year. They're educating their donors in terms of these different ways to give. And so it's not just a surprise come October, November that, hey, have you thought about making a qualified charitable distribution, or have you considered giving a gift through your donor advised fund? They've been talking to their donors about these opportunities throughout the year. And so this just serves really as that final reminder to make that gift before the year-end deadline. I would say it's also a great time to get creative. So maybe get your executive director or your board president to record a video, talk about the impact that giving has made throughout the year, and then have them ask those donors to consider a final year-end gift.
I completely agree, Julie. All of those are excellent suggestions. And I come from a tax planning background, and I've had to learn over the years that one thing that is so critical is not overcomplicate the message. I can get very excited about a qualified charitable distribution or a charitable remainder trust and talk all about the intricacies of those vehicles. But what's really critical is that you send action-oriented, clear messaging to your donors, and you don't want to overcomplicate things.
I agree with that. And I think with some of these annual appeals, again, your annual appeal can focus on general operating expenses, but maybe a special project. I think people like to give to something that's unique, that they can see the results for, they can really connect with. So think about that when you are creating these annual appeals, what you want to be raising funds for.
You know, I hate to keep circling back to my holiday shopping and how it usually happens pretty late. So we need to get the QCDs, start establishing those considerably before year end. What about donors who maybe have a tendency to run it up to the last minute, take it down to the wire? What are some last minute gifts that donors can make that organizations can put out there into the world?
Grant, that question always makes me laugh because myself and anyone who's worked in fundraising has that donor that is truly running into your office with a check on December 31st. Every nonprofit I've ever worked for has made sure that our doors were open as late as possible on December 31st in order to receive those last minute checks and gifts. Another excellent last minute gift is a stock transfer. It used to be that stock was held in a physical paper certificate, but now it's all electronic and held in accounts, and a broker can quickly and easily transfer between the two accounts. So you certainly don't want to be trying to make this happen on a Saturday or a Sunday, but during the business week at year end, those transactions can really happen very quickly.
So on New Year's Eve, your plan giving office might want to bring champagne to work that day, bring in the new year there.
It's been done.
Let's shift a little bit. So Washington has just made some pretty significant new tax laws. And as we all know, the economy is always shifting. What are some of the best ways for donors to make year-end gifts in light of the new tax law and the oftentimes uncertain nature of the economy?
Well, the new tax law and the uncertain nature of the economy has created volatility in the markets. Volatility does bring opportunity. People may have gains that they'd like to avoid. They may have losses that they'd like to take and offset something. So that's definitely one of the elements. We've seen a rise in the popularity of donor advised funds, and they tend to even out the peaks and valleys of earnings and tax law and economy. So we've definitely seen a rise in the use of donor advised funds to help level those peaks and valleys.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the donor advised fund, especially for that feature that you mentioned, in that the money has already been put into the fund. And so if the donor feels like they don't have the capacity to give in a certain year, maybe they're used to giving a gift of cash, or maybe their stock hasn't appreciated, they should be reminded and encouraged to give through that donor advised fund, because they do not have to make an additional gift. That gift is already in the fund and just allows them to then direct that money to your organization without them feeling it in their pocketbook.
So I'm curious, is year-end messaging a year-long strategy, or is it something that organizations should just start talking about in the latter months of the year?
Well, Grant, Julie touched on this earlier in that an appeal for year-end giving should not feel like it's out of the blue or that your donor hadn't heard from you all year long. It's sort of just the finish line, but it is part of an overarching year-long plan. I want to touch a bit on how planned giving plays into year-end giving. It's really difficult because generally it's immediate funds that you're seeking. But with the year-end campaigns, you are having a lot of communication with your donors. And I think it is critical to drip in planned giving messaging in all communications throughout the year, including year-end appeals. At the end of your signature line, mention something about giving through a will, add your bequest language. If you've got a little bit of space somewhere, just dribble in the planned giving messaging within the year-end messaging.
Yeah, and I think it started sooner than later. Some of my clients have expressed, hey, we'll just start sending out these end of year publications in the beginning of December. And that's quite honestly just a little too late. People from Thanksgiving on, as you know, just are overwhelmed by the holidays, the cooking, right? The cleaning, the food shopping, the gift buying, the travel. And so you want to send your messaging out earlier, September, October, to get people in that mindset, thinking about that year-end gift. Remember that donor behavior plays a big part in this end of year giving. So get them thinking about it earlier so they can cross it off their list.
I truly believe that we learn best from our mistakes. Is there anything in your experience that you can advise nonprofits to look out for or avoid or just otherwise be aware of so they don't make maybe some of the same mistakes that other organizations have?
I would say that it's not segmenting your audience and sending the same message to everyone. It's so important to look at your database, look at your audience, and segment them. There's so many different categories that you can look at: age, net worth, the overlay of those two data points, consistency of giving, longevity of giving. It's so important to customize the message for the individual audience. You certainly don't want to send messaging about bequest giving to someone in their 30s. Maybe you want to avoid sending information about cryptocurrency to someone in their 90s. So you have to think about the gift vehicles, what's appropriate for the person's age, for their net worth, and for their connection to your organization. So I would say that that's one of the biggest mistakes that a nonprofit can make when they're trying to integrate their planned giving into that year-end strategy.
I agree, Julie. Absolutely. Another thing that I've seen, and it's difficult with nonprofits because everyone is struggling with staffing issues, but a lack of follow-up. There may be somebody who inquired in July about making a gift. Well, make sure you follow up with them at the end of the year. And to my point of there being a real hard deadline, make sure every inquiry, every contact for year-end giving is followed up with and completed.
That's great advice. Great advice. I had a question earlier, and I think you mostly answered it, but is there a certain type of donors that are most responsive to planned giving messages during the season?
Well, certainly with planned giving, we tend to be talking about those older donors, generally over the age of 65. Those are the people who are reviewing their estate and planning for the future, how they would like things to be distributed. Donors without children or with grown children. Volunteers are excellent people. And there's one segment that sort of gets forgotten. We often in fundraising look to people who have been long-term and loyal donors, frequency of giving. But with planned giving, it's important to look to those who may have lapsed in their giving. They may have moved to a retirement community. Somebody else may be managing their check writing. And it doesn't mean that those people care any less about your organization. So it is critical to use those tools that Julie mentioned and track down those people who have lapsed.
Definitely. And one thing all of those groups have in common that you mentioned, Kristin, is their connection to the organization. And so these are not individuals who came to your golf outing in September and all of a sudden they're new to your organization and you're going to hit them up for a bequest or a gift from their donor advised fund. These are individuals who have a connection to the organization, whether through their volunteerism, their board role, being a long-term donor, being a lapsed donor. And so that's the audience that is going to be most responsive to these planned gift asks.
Wow, thanks for that. This has all been really helpful and very elucidating. I have a little thought experiment for the two of you. Say that you are working for a nonprofit organization and you're in the office today and tomorrow and the rest of this week. What are some very simple actions that the two of you could do that would really increase year-end impact giving?
One element, Grant, that I would suggest is education of your staff. And that includes the receptionist, the person who's answering the phones, the person who is the first person that you see when you walk in the door. Across all levels of your organization, there should be some understanding of the nature of these gifts and why some of these, the year-end gifts, are very timely and need to be addressed very quickly. I also would suggest, as I mentioned earlier, taking advantage of this communication blast, so to speak, to include planned giving messaging wherever you have space available.
So in the words of Joe, quick story here. In my previous life, I worked in a continuing care retirement community. And I remember during the holidays, some of our residents would literally get 90, 100 pieces of mail during the holidays. And these were all asks. These were all asks for the annual appeal, and it was overwhelming. And they literally stood next to the garbage can and tossed them all. So my advice would be to try and stand out as best as you can. Is it a colorful, large postcard? Is it an envelope that's not white, that comes in a color? Is it a phone call letting that donor know to be on the lookout for a piece of mail? So it's a great time to get creative and stand out. And again, looking at the timing. If you're inundating your donors all at the same time, then you do risk having that donor not respond to your appeal. And so again, get creative, do your best to stand out, and consider the timing for this year-end giving.
This is all great information. I really appreciate it. And obviously a big thanks to you, Kristin and Julie, for coming back on the show. It's always great to have you here sharing your insights and your expertise.
Thank you, Grant.
Yeah, I hope this conversation was very helpful for everyone at this critical time of the year. Thanks for listening. We hope today's discussion gave you practical takeaways to grow your plan giving program. To submit questions and topics for future episodes, go to sharpegroup.org or listen to us on your favorite podcast app. If you found this podcast insightful, be sure to like, review, and subscribe. Until then, stay sharp.